There are moments in life when a single sentence can erase years of effort, dignity, and silence. For me, it happened in a glass-walled conference room, under white lights that didn't blink when my boss smiled and shared something. That was never his to tell, if you're listening right now. Please like this video, subscribe, and stay until the very end because what started as my deepest humiliation slowly became the quiet rise that no one, especially him, saw coming. I wasn't always the woman who speaks calmly about power and patience. Once, I was the woman who kept her head down, who believed hard work would protect her, who trusted that professionalism meant safety. I had worked at that company for 6 years. 6 years of arriving early, staying late, answering emails no one else wanted to touch. I built processes that kept departments afloat. I trained people who would later outrank me. I didn't complain. I didn't boast. I told myself consistency would eventually be rewarded, and for a while it was. Until he became my manager, he was charming in public, precise with his words, generous with praise when others were listening. In private, he was different, observant, calculating. He noticed what made people flinch. He collected weaknesses the way others collect achievements. I didn't know that then. I trusted him. One afternoon, during a casual one-on-one, I shared something personal. Not because I wanted sympathy, but because he asked in that soft, professional way that makes honesty feel safe. I told him about a chapter of my past I had worked hard to outgrow. A struggle, a mistake, a truth I carried quietly and responsibly. He nodded, reassured me, thanked me for trusting him. I thought that was the end of it. It wasn't. Weeks later, during a team meeting meant to discuss restructuring, he told a story, framed as an example, a lesson. He didn't say my name, but he didn't have to. Every detail belonged to me. I felt the room shift before I felt the pain. The way eyes changed, the way silence thickened, the way my throat closed as if my body understood before my mind could catch up. I remember sitting there, perfectly still, while my heart pounded loud enough to drown out his voice. I remember wondering if I should interrupt, defend myself, stand up. I didn't, because shame is paralyzing like that. It convinces you that silence is safer than truth. After the meeting, no one said anything directly. They never do. But things changed. Conversations stopped when I entered rooms. Opportunities quietly passed me by. Projects I built were reassigned without explanation. I became invisible and exposed at the same time, and he watched, not cruelly, not openly, with curiosity, as if he wanted to see what would break first, my confidence or my composure. I went home that night and sat in the dark. No music, no phone. Just the sound of my own breathing and the weight of something that felt irreversible. I asked myself a question I had never asked before. What happens when the person who controls your career knows the parts of you you're still healing from? The answer came slowly, painfully. You survive quietly. I kept working, smiling, delivering results. I became smaller in meetings, careful with words, hyper-aware of how I was perceived. At night, I replayed everything. What I said, what I should have said, what I would never say again. I didn't report him, not because I didn't know how, but because I understood the system well enough to know how stories are buried, how intentions are questioned, how women are told they misunderstood. So I chose endurance, but endurance changes you. Something inside me hardened not into anger, but into awareness. I started noticing patterns. Who got promoted? Who was protected? Who was silenced? And I noticed him watching me more closely. As if he sensed something shifting. What he didn't know was that humiliation has a strange effect on a woman who refuses to disappear. It makes her observant. It makes her patient. And it teaches her exactly how power actually works. I began learning quietly about leadership, about operations, about the parts of the business no one wanted to deal with, but everyone depended on. I volunteered for difficult tasks. I stayed late not out of fear, but strategy. I stopped sharing myself. I started studying everyone else. Months passed. My role didn't improve, but my knowledge did. My confidence didn't show, but it grew roots. And then something happened. The company began struggling, subtle at first. Missed targets, delayed decisions, leadership tension. I watched from my seat, silent, capable, underestimated, and my boss, started leaning on me more, asking questions, seeking input, relying on the very woman he thought he had diminished. That was when I realized something important. He had taken my past to control me, but he had underestimated my future. He didn't know yet that the ground beneath him was already shifting. He didn't know that exposure didn't break me. It refined me. And what was coming next was not loud, not dramatic. But irreversible. Asterisk. There's a strange kind of clarity that comes after humiliation. Not immediately. Not all at once. It arrives quietly after the tears stop surprising you. After your body learns how to function while your pride still aches. If you're still listening, thank you. Please like this video, subscribe, and stay with me, because this part is where the silence begins to change its meaning. After that meeting, after my secret was exposed without my consent, I stopped expecting fairness. That was the first lesson. I realized something uncomfortable but true. The workplace wasn't a place of justice. It was a place of power. And power didn't always belong to the loudest voice or the highest title. Sometimes it belonged to the person who understood the system better than anyone else. So I watched. I watched how decisions were made in hallways, not meetings. I watched how credit moved upward and blame rolled downhill. I watched how my boss spoke about transparency while thriving on control, and I watched myself. I noticed how the shame he tried to plant in me began to lose its grip. How repetition dulled its sharpest edges. How I stopped flinching when my past crossed my mind because something unexpected was happening. I was no longer afraid of being seen. Once your worst truth has been exposed, fear loses leverage. I still worked under him, still answered to him, still felt the imbalance. But internally, something shifted. I no longer wanted his approval. I wanted understanding of the business, of leadership, of leverage. I began asking different questions. Not aloud, but internally. Who actually keeps this company running? Where does the real value sit? What breaks if certain people leave? The answers surprised me. It wasn't senior leadership. It wasn't him. It was the systems, the processes, the people behind the scenes who understood how everything connected. So I made myself indispensable without making noise. I learned budgets, forecasts, vendor negotiations, crisis response. I became the person people went to when something went wrong. And deadlines didn't care about hierarchy. My boss noticed. He started involving me in conversations I was never invited to before, asking for my opinion, then presenting it as his own in meetings. And strangely, I didn't stop him, not because I didn't care, but because I was playing a longer game. At home, my life became simpler, quieter. I stopped explaining myself to people who didn't need explanations. I stopped shrinking to make others comfortable. I started therapy not because I was broken, but because I wanted to understand why betrayal hurt so deeply. Why power imbalances leave invisible scars. I learned that shame thrives in secrecy, and that self-worth grows in truth. The more I healed, the less power he had over me. Months later, a restructuring was announced. Whispers filled the office. Anxiety crept into conversations. Positions were going to change. Departments would merge. Leadership would be reevaluated. I saw something then I hadn't seen before, fear in him. He masked it well. Still confident. Still controlled. But it slipped through in small ways. Shorter temper, over-explaining, checking his phone more often. He began leaning on me heavily. Can you handle this? What do you think about that? I trust your judgment. Double quotes. Trust. The word almost made me smile, because trust, when it's real, doesn't need leverage. I handled every task flawlessly. Not to impress him, but to build a reputation that existed independently of him, and slowly, people started noticing, not loudly, not publicly, but quietly. I was invited into rooms I had never entered before, asked questions no one used to ask me. My name came up in conversations I wasn't present for. One afternoon, a senior executive asked me something simple: "Have you ever thought about leadership?" I answered honestly, "I already practice it. I just don't have the title." They smiled. That was the moment I understood. Exposure didn't end my career, it redirected it. I went home that day and cried, not from pain, but from relief. Because I finally saw the path ahead of me clearly. I wasn't waiting to be saved. I wasn't waiting for justice. I was becoming inevitable. And my boss? He still thought he was ahead of the story. He didn't know that the woman whose secret he once used as power was quietly learning how to outgrow him. What came next wasn't revenge, it was a reckoning. There's a peculiar moment in life when the quiet patience you've cultivated suddenly transforms into power. It doesn't announce itself with a drum roll. It doesn't demand recognition. It simply exists, and anyone who underestimated you can feel it long before they see it. If you've stayed with me until now, thank you. Please like this video, subscribe, and stay until the very end, because this is the part where everything comes full circle. Where years of silent observation, endurance, and quiet strategy finally converge into a life no one, especially him, could have predicted. The restructuring came quietly at first. Rumors in the hallways, whispers over coffee, and then the announcement: new leadership roles, new responsibilities, and a chance for people who had been overlooked to step into positions that mattered. I was offered a role I had long been preparing for, but never asked for: department head. Authority over the very areas he thought he controlled. Oversight of teams he believed he could manipulate. And with it, a salary and responsibility he had never considered I was ready for. I remember walking into the office the next day, keys to my new domain in hand. My heart wasn't pounding from fear or triumph, it was calm. My voice didn't shake. My steps didn't falter. I was the same woman, refined by every trial, every silent humiliation, every lesson he thought he had taught me through shame. And then I saw him. He approached my office cautiously. The same smile he used to hide arrogance, now slightly tight at the edges. There was hesitation in his step. Subtle, almost imperceptible, but it didn't escape me. "Congratulations," he said, polite, measured. Watching my reaction, waiting, as if my acceptance of his presence would somehow validate him, I nodded. "Thank you." No pause. No lingering conversation. Just truth between us. I had outgrown him. Not with drama, not with confrontation, but with competence, preparation, and patience. I took my seat, opened my laptop, and began reviewing reports. He lingered for a moment, then walked away, pretending casual confidence. But the tension was palpable. In small ways, he began to miscalculate, second-guess, and even avoid decisions he once executed confidently. He was still my superior on paper, but the real influence, the knowledge, the ability, the respect had quietly shifted over the following weeks. I noticed changes in him I had never expected. Subtle mistakes, hesitations in meetings, questions asked to me that he would have previously dismissed. He tried to assert dominance through small gestures, delegating tasks, controlling access, but every attempt faltered because the foundation of authority had quietly moved. I had built credibility and respect without him noticing. The poetic irony was delicious in its quietness. He had exposed my past thinking it would shatter me. He had underestimated the very strength that humiliation cultivates. He thought breaking me meant controlling me. Instead, it made me unstoppable. One afternoon, he called me into his office. His tone was measured, but tinged with something new, awareness. "I need your input on this project," he said. "You're the only one who seems to fully understand the workflow." I leaned back, calm, and studied him. "Of course," I replied, and I walked him through every detail. knowing he would rely on my expertise more than his own instincts, just as I had anticipated. And it was here I understood the full circle of what had happened. Revenge is often imagined as something dramatic: exposure, humiliation, punishment. But true, lasting power is far quieter. It is survival, growth, and mastery that your adversary cannot undo. Months passed. Projects succeeded. Teams flourished under my guidance. And every so often, I would catch him pausing, watching the processes I implemented. The respect I commanded, the authority I wielded effortlessly. His eyes betrayed fleeting regret, not loud, not confrontational, but real. The understanding that he had underestimated me, that his attempt to dominate me had failed, and that he was now reliant on the very woman he tried to diminish. I never gossiped about him. I never flaunted his failures. My revenge wasn't in spectacle, it was in competence, dignity, and the quiet reclamation of what was always mine: self-respect, power, and authority. At night, I often reflect on that journey. The humiliation, the sleepless nights, the fear that I wouldn't recover it all became a crucible. Every moment of suffering transformed into awareness, every setback into strategy, every insult into understanding. And in that understanding, I found my peace. He had thought he controlled me with secrets, shame, and exposure. But the truth is, no one controls anyone who decides to master their own journey. And when that mastery is achieved, the past no longer matters, only the power you hold in the present. I stand today not in anger, not in triumph over him, but in a quiet, unshakable peace. The woman he tried to break is now the woman leading, teaching, guiding, and thriving. He might have thought he wrote the story, but I held the pen all along. And that is the kind of revenge that no one anticipates. Not the kind that shouts, but the kind that whispers, "I am whole. I am capable. I am free."